Picture this, you're locked in a coffin, not for an hour, not for a day, but for weeks. The air's getting thin, the darkness is suffocating, and every sound could be your doom. Now imagine you're not just anyone, you're a king, and that coffin, it's your own kingdom turned against you. This is the story of Charles II of England, a young king who was politically buried alive, hunted like an animal, and somehow clawed his way out of the darkness to live and tell the tale. So grab a snack, get comfy, and let's jump into this epic adventure. Trust me, you're not going to want to miss this. So why is Charles II's story such a big deal? Well, it's not just about a king dodging soldiers or hiding in a tree, though. Spoiler alert, that happens, and it's insane. This is about a guy who lost everything, his crown, his country, his dad, and still found a way to beat the odds. It's the kind of story that grabs you by the heart and doesn't let go. Think about a movie like The Fugitive with Harrison Ford, where an innocent man is on the run, outsmarting a system that's rigged against him. That's Charles II, but instead of a city, he's got an entire nation chasing him. For my American viewers, this is like if a president was declared a traitor, hunted across the country, and had to rely on ordinary people, farmers, workers, everyday heroes to survive. It's a story of grit, loyalty, and second chances, and it hits home whether you're into history or just love a good underdog tale. Let's set the stage. It's the mid-17th century, and England is a mess. The country's been torn apart by a brutal civil war, think families, divided towns, burned and blood soaking the fields. On one side, you've got the King Charles III, who believes he's chosen by God, untouchable, ruling however he wants. On the other side, you've got Parliament led by tough-as-nails guys like Oliver Cromwell, who say, nope, the king's got to follow the law like everyone else. This isn't just politics, it's a fight for the soul of England. And it ends with something unthinkable. The King Charles III is put on trial, found guilty and beheaded in front of his own people. Boom, the monarchy's dead. England's now a republic, and Charles II, the teenage son of the dead king, is left with nothing but a title and a target on his back. Why does this matter to us today? Charles II's story isn't just some dusty history lesson. It's about what happens when the world you know falls apart, and you've got to dig deep to keep going. Think about a real-life example, Aaron Ralston, that hiker who got trapped by a boulder in Utah back in 2003. He was stuck for 5 days facing death, but he found the strength to cut off his own arm to survive. That's the kind of raw, do-or-die spirit Charles II had to summon when his kingdom became his coffin. He was 21 on the run with a massive bounty on his head, $1,000, which back then was like winning the lottery. Every step he took, every person he met could have been his last. And yet he didn't just survive, he outsmarted an entire nation. Here's the crazy part, this isn't just about one guy's escape. It's about the people who risked everything to help him, farmers, Catholics, ordinary folks who saw a king in trouble and said, we've got you. It's like those stories you hear about the Underground Railroad in America, where people put their lives on the line to help others find freedom. Charles's story shows what happens when courage and loyalty collide in the face of impossible odds. And let me tell you the details, like hiding in a tree while soldiers curse your name below, are going to blow your mind. Before we dive into the chaos of how Charles ended up a fugitive, let's talk about why this story hooks us. It's not just the danger, it's the stakes. Charles wasn't just fighting for his life, he was fighting to prove the monarchy wasn't dead. Every move he made was a middle finger to the people who thought they'd buried his family's legacy. For you guys watching, think about a time you've been counted out, maybe a job, a dream, or a tough moment in life. Charles's story is proof you can come back from that, no matter how dark it gets. So stick with me, because in the next part, we're going to unpack the war that shattered England and set Charles on this wild path. If you're loving this, already hit that like button, drop a comment with your favorite survival story, and let's keep rolling. If you're just joining us, we're diving into the epic saga of Charles II, the king who was basically buried alive in his own kingdom. In the last part, we set the stage for this real-life thriller, but now it's time to zoom out and see how England got to the point where they chop off their king's head and turn the whole country into a trap for his son. Buckle up, because we're going into the English Civil War, a time when families were split, fields ran red, and the idea of what a king even is got turned upside down. This isn't just history. It's a story about power, betrayal, and a nation tearing itself apart. So imagine England in the 1640s, For centuries, people believed their king was God's pick, untouchable, ruling by divine right. That's Charles I, our guy's dad, who's sitting on the throne thinking he can do whatever he wants, no questions asked. But across the table, you've got Parliament, think of them like Congress in the US, saying, "Hold up, king, you've got to play by the rules." This wasn't just a polite disagreement, it was a full-on clash over who gets to call the shots. Add in some serious religious drama, Puritans wanting a stricter, simpler faith versus the king's fancy Anglican ceremonies, and you've got a powder keg ready to blow. For my American viewers, picture the tension before the Revolutionary War when colonists started questioning the king's authority, but crank it up to 11 with swords, cannons, and neighbor fighting neighbor. The spark hits in 1642 and boom, the English Civil War breaks out. This isn't one big battle. It's years of brutal fighting across England, Scotland, and Ireland. Families are picking sides, your brother might be, for the king, your cousin for Parliament. Towns get burned, crops get destroyed, and ordinary folks are caught in the middle. One key battle, Naseby in 1645, shows how bad it got. The king's forces, called royalists, were smashed by Parliament's new model army, a disciplined, Bible-thumping war machine led by Oliver Cromwell. This guy's no joke. He's like a mix of a drill sergeant and a preacher, and his army's got the best training and gear in the game. By 1646, Charles I is losing, and soon he's captured. But here's where it gets wild. What do you do with a king you've beaten? Parliament's got a problem. Let him go, and he might start the war all over again. Lock him up forever. That's tricky when half the country still sees him as God's chosen. So in a move that shocked the world, they put Charles on trial for treason against his own people. Imagine if the US tried a president for betraying the Constitution. That's the vibe. In January 1649, they build a scaffold outside the banqueting house in London. It's freezing, the crowd silent, and Charles I steps out cool as ice. Fun fact, he wore 2 shirts so he wouldn't shiver and look scared. Then with one swing of an axe, his head's off. The crowd gasps, some cheer, some cry. 1,000 years of the king is sacred just went out the window. England's now a commonwealth, a republic, no king needed. Game over for the monarchy, or so they thought. This is where Charles II, our main guy, gets thrown into the deep end. He's just 18, chilling in Europe when he hears his dad's been executed. His world's shattered. He's technically king now, but it's like being the CEO of a company that just went bankrupt. No army, no money, no country. Parliament's calling him a traitor, and Cromwell's got England locked down like a fortress. For Americans, think of this like if the Founding Fathers won the Revolution and George Washington's kid was stuck hiding out in Canada plotting a comeback. The war didn't just kill Charles I, it split England's soul between those who wanted tradition and those who want a new way forward. Here's a real-life lesson from this chaos. Charles I's big mistake was thinking he could ignore Parliament and rule solo. He pushed too hard, taxed people without consent, and sparked a rebellion. It's like a boss who ignores their team and tanks the whole company. Leaders, whether kings or presidents, gotta listen to the people they serve, or things can go south fast. The war also shows how fast division can spiral. Sound familiar in today's polarized world. By the time Charles I's head rolled, England was done with kings, and Charles II was left to pick up the pieces. If you're hooked on this story, and I know you are, smash that like button, drop a comment about what you do if you were in Charles's shoes, and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter. Now we're zooming in on his son, Charles II, an 18-year-old kid who's just inherited a crown that's basically worthless. Picture this, you're a king, but you've got no kingdom, no army, no cash, just a title, and a whole lot of trouble. That's where we find Charles stuck in exile, fighting to keep his dream alive. For my American viewers, this is like being the heir to a family business that's gone bust with everyone out to get you. Let's dive into this chapter of Charles's story. It's all about grit, rejection, and surviving when the world's against you. Here we go. So it's 1649, and Charles II is in Europe, reeling from the news that his dad's been executed. He's in The Hague in the Netherlands when word hits England's a republic now led by Oliver Cromwell, who's basically the toughest sheriff in town. Charles is technically King Charles the New to his supporters, but to Cromwell and the new Commonwealth, he's a wanted man, a traitor whose very existence is a threat. Imagine being 18, suddenly jobless, homeless, and on a hit list. That's Charles's reality. He's a king without a kingdom, a political ghost haunting the fancy courts of Europe, trying to scrape together any help he can get. For Americans, think of this like a young Kennedy or Roosevelt kicked out of the US, begging foreign leaders for a lifeline while the government back home brands them a criminal. Charles's big plan convinced Europe's rulers to back his claim to the throne. He's knocking on doors, France, Spain, the Netherlands, asking for money soldiers, anything to take back England. But here's the catch, Europe's a mess too. The 30 Years' War just ended in 1648, and everyone's broke or busy with their own drama. Take France, for example. Charles turns to his cousin, King Louis XIV, who's a teenager himself dealing with a rebellion called the Fronde. One real-life moment, Charles shows up in Paris practically begging for troops, but Louis's advisors basically say, "Sorry, kid, we've got our own problems." It's a gut punch. The French court treats him like a charity case. Nice words, fancy dinners, but no real help. The Dutch, same story. They're more interested in trade than fighting England's battles. Charles is learning the hard way when you've got no power. Even your royal cousins don't take you seriously. This exile life isn't just about politics, it's personal. Charles is bouncing between courts, living off handouts, dodging spies sent by Cromwell to keep tabs on him. One story stands out in 1650. He's in Jersey, a tiny island loyal to the crown, trying to rally support. He's got a small crew of loyalists, but no money for a real army. He writes desperate letters promising rewards to anyone who'll back him, but most of his allies are either broke or scared. It's like trying to start a startup with no investors, except the stakes are life and death. Charles is young, charming, over 6 feet tall, with a knack for winning people over. But charm doesn't buy soldiers. He's stuck watching his dreams slip away, and the pressure's crushing. Let's compare this to something modern. Think of a political exile today, like a dissident fleeing a dictatorship. Maybe someone like Juan Guaido in Venezuela, claiming leadership but stuck abroad with no real power. Charles's situation is similar. He's got the title, but no one's rolling out the red carpet. His big mistake during this time, thinking he could rely on foreign royals who were more interested in their own thrones than his. It's a classic error, putting all your eggs in baskets that aren't yours. For us, it's like banking on a flaky friend to bail you out of a jam. Spoiler, they usually don't. Here's the lesson from Charles's exile: struggle's resilience is everything. He could have given up, blended into some European court, lived a quiet life. But he didn't. Every rejection, every door slammed in his face made him tougher, sharper. He's learning to play the long game, to keep his eyes on the prize even when it feels impossible. For you watching, think about a time you got knocked down, a job loss, a failed project, whatever. Charles's story says keep pushing even when the world's saying no. He's about to take a massive risk to reclaim his throne, and that's where things get really wild. If you've been with us so far, you know England's a hot mess after the Civil War, with Charles I's execution, leaving his son Charles II, a king with no kingdom, stuck in exile. Last time we saw him bouncing around Europe, begging for help and getting nowhere. But now in 1651, Charles is done waiting. He's about to make the boldest, riskiest move of his life, an all-or-nothing invasion to take back his throne. Spoiler alert, it's a disaster that'll leave him running for his life. For my American viewers, think of this like a scrappy underdog team charging into the Super Bowl against a powerhouse, except the stakes are way higher, and losing means death. Let's jump into the Battle of Worcester, where everything goes wrong and Charles's world turns into a nightmare. Here we go. So it's 1651 and Charles II is 21, itching to reclaim his crown. He's tired of being a royal, nobody scraping by in foreign courts. He's got a plan, but it's a long shot. Here's the deal: Scotland, which fought against his dad in the Civil War, is now having second thoughts about Cromwell's republic. They're worried England's new boss is getting too powerful. So Charles strikes a deal with the Scots. They crown him King of Scots in a chilly ceremony at Scone, nothing fancy, just a promise to fight for him. In return, he gets a ragtag army of Highlanders and Presbyterian loyalists. It's not the dream team, but it's all he's got. His big hope: march this army south into England, rally the royalists who still love the monarchy, and spark a rebellion to kick Cromwell out. Sounds good on paper, right? Yeah, not so much. Charles and his Scottish army, about 16,000 strong, cross the border and head for London. He's banking on English royalists joining up, thinking, the king's back, let's roll. But here's where it falls apart. England's exhausted. The Civil War drained, towns are wrecked, people are broke, and nobody wants another fight. Plus, Cromwell's got spies everywhere, and his new model army is like the Navy SEALs of the 17th century, tough, disciplined, and loyal to the Republic. Charles's march is like waving a red flag in front of a bull. By the time he reaches Worcester, a city in western England, his army's tired, hungry, and way smaller than he hoped. No big royalist uprising, no cheering crowds, just a sinking feeling that this might not end well. September 3rd, 1651 is the day it all hits the fan, the Battle of Worcester. Cromwell's got 28,000 battle-hardened troops, nearly twice Charles's numbers. It's a slaughter from the start. Charles doesn't just sit back. He's out there leading cavalry charges, sword in hand, trying to rally his men. One real-life moment he's seen riding through the chaos, shouting orders, dodging musket fire, and pushing his troops to hold the line. But it's hopeless. Cromwell's forces are too strong, too organized. By nightfall, the Scots are crushed. Thousands are killed or captured. Some prisoners are even shipped off to slavery in the West Indies. Worcester's streets are a mess of bodies and broken dreams. Charles barely escapes slipping out of the city as his army collapses around him. This is where the stakes get real. Cromwell's government slaps a $1,000 bounty on Charles's head. That's like $1 million today, enough to make any farmer or innkeeper think twice about loyalty. They plaster posters across England, "Wanted Charles Stuart tall guy," dark hair over 6 feet. In a world where most dudes are like 5'5", Charles is not exactly blending in. He's deep in enemy territory with no army, no plan, and every eye looking to cash in. It's like if a modern rebel leader, say someone trying to overthrow a regime, lost their base and had to dodge drones and checkpoints across the country. Charles's big mistake, overestimating the royalist support. He thought England would rise up for him, but war fatigue and Cromwell's iron grip kept people quiet. It's a classic blunder, assuming everyone's on your side when they're just trying to survive. Charles just got crushed at the Battle of Worcester in 1651, his army's gone, and he's the most wanted man in England with a 1,000 bounty on his head. He's no longer a king leading troops, he's a fugitive running for his life in a country that wants him dead. Today we're diving into one of the most iconic moments of his escape, the Royal Oak, where Charles literally hides in a tree to dodge Cromwell's soldiers. For my American viewers, this is like something out of a survival movie, like being on the run and hiding in plain sight while the bad guys are right there. Let's get into this heart-pounding chapter. It's all about courage, quick thinking, and the unsung heroes who saved a king. Here we go. Picture this, it's the morning after Worcester, September 4, 1651. Charles is exhausted, his fine armor swapped for dirty rags, riding through the night with a handful of loyal nobles. Cromwell's soldiers, the Roundheads, are scouring the countryside, and Charles's 6-foot-plus frame makes him a walking target. He's got to disappear fast. His crew knows they're too conspicuous together, so they split up. Charles ends up at Boscobel House, a remote farmhouse owned by the Pendrell family, simple tenant farmers, devout Catholics, and hardcore royalists. These folks aren't rich or powerful. They're regular people risking everything to protect their king. In England's Protestant Republic, Catholics are already persecuted, so hiding a fugitive king, that's a death sentence if they're caught. For Americans, think of this like abolitionists hiding runaway slaves on the Underground Railroad. Same vibes, same stakes. The Pendrells get to work. They strip Charles of his royal clothes, bye-bye fancy doublet, and dress him up as a woodcutter named William Jones. They grab shears, chop off his long royal hair, and have him rub soot on his face to look like a guy who's been working the fields. This isn't just a costume change, it's a total transformation. The King of England is now a nobody blending in to survive. But here's the problem, Boscobel House isn't safe. Cromwell's soldiers are closing in, searching every barn cellar and haystack. There's nowhere to hide inside, so one of the Pendrell brothers, Richard, comes up with a crazy idea: take Charles to a massive oak tree in the nearby woods with branches so thick they can hide 2 men. This tree, soon to be the legendary Royal Oak, is about to become Charles's lifeline. Charles and a loyal officer, William Careless, climb into the oak's dense canopy, finding a spot where the leaves swallow them whole. They're up there all day, not moving, barely breathing. Imagine the terror. You're hungry, sore from the battle, and every snapped twig or rustling leaf could mean death. At one point, Charles, dead tired, starts to nod off and nearly falls out of the tree. Careless has to grab him to keep him from crashing down. Then the worst moment hits. A troop of Roundhead soldiers rides into the woods and stops right under the tree. Charles can hear their voices, the clink of their swords, their horses snorting. They're griping about how the traitor, Charles Stuart, keeps slipping away. If one of them just looks up, it's game over, straight to the scaffold, just like his dad. Charles is literally entombed in this tree, a living coffin of branches, his heart pounding so loud he's sure they'll hear it. This is survival at its rawest. For Americans, this moment feels like something out of history you'd vibe with, like Harriet Tubman hiding in a swamp while slave catchers pass by, or even a modern survival story, like a soldier evading capture behind enemy lines. The tension is insane, but what makes it epic is the Pendrell's courage. These farmers could have turned Charles in for a fortune, but they chose loyalty over money. Their faith and royalist beliefs drove them to risk their lives, no questions asked. A common mistake Charles avoided here: trusting the wrong people. He leaned on the Catholic underground, a network of safe houses and priest holes built to protect priests in Protestant England. It was a smart move, unlike trusting flashy nobles who might sell him out. The soldiers eventually ride off, bored and clueless, and as dusk falls, Charles and Careless climb down, stiff and shaken, but alive. The royal oak just saved his life, and it'll go down as one of the most famous trees in history. This moment isn't just about survival, it's about the power of ordinary people stepping up in extraordinary ways. The lesson here: when the chips are down, trust in unexpected allies can make all the difference. Think about your own life. Maybe a friend, a co-worker, or even a stranger who came through when you needed it most. That's the Pendrell spirit, and it's why Charles is still in the game. So it's early September 1651, and Charles is on the move thanks to the Catholic underground, a secret network of loyalists hiding him in safe houses. But staying put isn't an option. Cromwell's Roundheads are combing the countryside, and Charles needs to reach a port to catch a ship to France. Enter Jane Lane, a 20-something sister of a royalist officer who's about to become the MVP of this escape. The plan: Charles, still disguised as William Jones, a scruffy woodcutter, will pose as Jane's servant as she travels to visit a friend in Bristol, a port city. It's a brilliant cover. Nobody's going to suspect a king is playing the lowly footman, riding a few paces behind a lady on horseback. For Americans, think of this like Harriet Tubman guiding fugitives, but instead of a conductor, Jane's the mastermind keeping Charles alive. This woman's got nerves of steel, and her quick thinking is about to save the day. Their journey is a minefield of danger. Every village, every inn, every random passerby could blow their cover. Charles, at over 6 feet tall, with a face that's hard to forget, has to keep his head down and play the part of a nobody. Let's talk about some of these heart-stopping moments. First up, they stop at a blacksmith to get their horse reshod. The blacksmith takes one look at the horseshoe and says, this was forged up north, not around here. It's a tiny detail, but it could unravel everything. North is where Charles came from after Worcester. Jane stays cool, and Charles mumbles some excuse about borrowing the horse. Crisis averted, but it's a reminder: one wrong word and it's over. It's like if you're sneaking through a checkpoint and someone notices your ID looks off pure adrenaline. Then there's the inn incident. They're staying at a roadside inn, and Charles gets roped into kitchen duty. The cook, a grumpy guy who used to work in a royal palace, hands Charles a spit to roast meat. Now Charles has never done a day's manual labor in his life. He's a king, not a chef. He fumbles at turning the spit all wrong, and the cook snaps. "What kind of idiot are you?" Charles just takes it, playing the dumb servant, while his heart's probably racing. Imagine the irony: the King of England getting yelled at like a clumsy intern. For Americans, it's like a celebrity going undercover on Undercover Boss and almost getting caught because they can't flip a burger right. Charles's ability to stay humble and keep his cool is what keeps him alive. The scariest moment. At another safe house, a butler who fought for Charles's dad in the Civil War locks eyes with him and knows. This guy's seen the royal family up close. There's no fooling him. Charles freezes, expecting betrayal, but the butler pulls him aside, tears in his eyes, and whispers his loyalty. He could have turned Charles in for a fortune, but he chooses honor over cash. Moments like these show the kind of loyalty Charles inspired, even in the darkest times. It's like those stories from the American Civil War where ordinary folks risk everything to protect someone on the run, no reward needed. Jane Lane's role here is huge. She's not just a cover story, she's the brains of the operation, keeping their story straight and charming anyone who gets suspicious. She's got to act natural while knowing one slip-up means death for both of them. Her courage is next level. Think of American heroes like Rosa Parks standing firm under pressure. Charles's big mistake to avoid acting like a king. One haughty word or royal gesture could have blown his cover. Instead, he leans into the disguise, proving he's not just a spoiled prince, he's got the smarts and guts to survive. The lesson here: adaptability is everything. Charles had to ditch his ego and play a role he'd never imagined, like a CEO mopping floors to keep a low profile. For you watching, think about a time you had to swallow your pride to get through a tough spot, maybe taking a job you felt was beneath you, or staying quiet when you wanted to speak out. Charles shows us that sometimes playing the part is how you win the game. Jane Lane and the loyalists around her also remind us that teamwork makes the dream work. Charles couldn't have done this alone. It's early October 1651, and Charles has been on the run for over a month, bouncing from safe house to safe house, thanks to the Catholic underground and loyalists like Jane Lane. He's exhausted, paranoid, and still a long way from France, where he can finally breathe easy. The plan now is to reach Shoreham by Sea, a small port on England's south coast, and find a ship to smuggle him across the channel. But getting there is no walk in the park. Every road, every inn is a potential trap, and Cromwell's spies are relentless. The Catholic network pulls through again, hooking Charles up with a trustworthy merchant named Francis Mansell and a ship captain, Nicholas Tattersall, who's game to help for the right price. Charles's cover: he's one of two merchants fleeing debt, a story that's believable enough to avoid suspicion. For Americans, it's like a fugitive posing as a broke businessman to slip past border patrol, high stakes, high stress. The night before the escape is pure tension. Charles and his small crew, including his loyal buddy Lord Wilmot, have to lay low in a Shoreham inn packed with rowdy soldiers. These guys are celebrating the news of Charles's defeat at Worcester, toasting the end of the monarchy, while the actual king sits there sipping ale, pretending to be a nobody. Imagine the irony: they're cheering the death of his cause, and he's right under their noses, heart pounding, praying no one recognizes him. It's like a scene from Inglourious Bastards, where you're holding your breath, waiting for the cover to blow. One wrong glance, one drunk soldier getting too curious, and it's straight to the gallows. Charles keeps his cool, blending in, but you know he's counting every second until they can bolt. Finally, in the early hours of October 15th, 1651, they sneak out to board Tattersall's ship, the Surprise, a small coal vessel that's seen better days. But there's a hitch: the tide's not right, and they're stuck, waiting, nerves frayed. Then as they're sailing toward the English Channel, Tattersall starts dragging his feet. Maybe he's getting cold feet, or maybe he's fishing for a bigger payout. Charles, who's been through too much to get this far, pulls the captain aside and reminds him of their deal, probably with a hefty bonus thrown in. It's a tense moment, like a getaway driver second-guessing the plan mid-heist. For Americans, think of a modern escape like a whistleblower sneaking out of a country with the feds closing in. Every delay feels like a lifetime. As the Surprise nears the Isle of Wight, Charles is on edge, watching the horizon, knowing one patrol ship could end it all. But Tattersall finally steers south, and on the morning of October the 16th, 1651, Charles steps onto the shores of Fécamp, France. He's made it. After 42 days of running, hiding, and outsmarting an entire nation, he's free. The relief must have been unreal, like crossing the finish line of a marathon you weren't sure you'd survive. The Catholic underground, Jane Lane, the Pendrels, they all played a part, and their loyalty paid off. Fun fact: after Charles regained his throne years later, he rewarded his helpers handsomely. Jane Lane got a pension and a portrait. The Pendrels got land and cash. These weren't just random acts of kindness, they were game changers. Let's analyze this. The Catholic Underground's network was like a 17th century resistance movement with safe houses and secret codes that rivaled modern espionage. Compare it to the French resistance in World War II, smuggling people past Nazis, same level of danger, same kind of bravery. Charles's big mistake to avoid trusting shaky allies. Tattersall's hesitation shows how even paid helpers could waver under pressure. The lesson here is persistence. Charles faced setback after setback, like failed boat deals and near betrayals, but he kept pushing. For you watching, think of a time you were this close to giving up, but powered through. Charles's escape says, keep going, even when the finish line feels impossible. So Charles is safe in France, but he's not exactly living the high life. It's 1651 and he's stuck in exile for another 9 years, bouncing between European courts, scraping by on handouts and dodging Cromwell's spies. Think of him as a guy with a big title but an empty bank account crashing on his cousin's couches in France and the Netherlands. He's still got that $1,000 bounty on his head, and England's Commonwealth is chugging along under Oliver Cromwell's iron fist. But here's the thing, republics aren't always as stable as they seem. Fast forward to 1658, Cromwell dies, and his son Richard takes over. Problem is, Richard's no Cromwell. He's like a substitute teacher trying to control a rowdy class. The republic starts to wobble, and people are getting tired of the Puritans' strict no-fun vibe. No theaters, no parties, just sermons and rules. By 1660, England's ready for a change. The people are nostalgic for the old days when a king meant stability and a bit of flair. Enter General George Monk, a big-shot soldier who sees the writing on the wall. He's like, this republic thing isn't working. Monk marches to London, gets Parliament to dissolve itself, and a new Parliament invites Charles to come home. But Charles isn't just waltzing back, he's smart. He issues the Declaration of Breda, a genius move promising amnesty, religious tolerance, and to share power with Parliament. It's like a politician today promising unity after a divisive election, and it wins hearts. On May 29, 1660, his 30th birthday, Charles lands at Dover to cheering crowds. His journey to London is a victory parade with bonfires, bells ringing, and people partying like it's 1699. The guy who hid in a tree is now riding through the city gates as king. Talk about a glow-up. Charles becomes known as the Merry Monarch, and it's easy to see why. After years of Puritan gloom, he brings back the fun theaters, reopened music's back, and his court is like a 17th century Vegas full of parties, and yeah, a few famous mistresses. But don't let the charm fool you, this guy's no pushover. His escape taught him to read people like a book. Unlike his dad who pushed too hard and lost his head, Charles plays it cool, balancing charm with caution. Take his handling of the Great Fire of London in 1666, he's out in the streets, helping put out fires, winning over the crowd. Or the Second Dutch War, sure it's messy, but he negotiates peace to keep England stable. For Americans, think of a leader like Abraham Lincoln, navigating a divided nation with smarts and charisma, keeping things together without alienating anyone. What's his legacy? Charles's reign isn't perfect, religious tensions and money troubles linger, but he sets the stage for modern England. His pragmatic style helps avoid another civil war, and his love of science and culture, he backs the Royal Society, shapes the Enlightenment. The royal oak, that tree he hid in, becomes a symbol of loyalty, with pubs and ships named after it even today. And Charles loves telling his escape story over dinner. He's regaling his court with tales of the tree, the disguises, the close calls, like a grandpa who can't stop talking about his glory days. It's not just ego, it's a reminder of what he survived and who helped him. He never forgets the Pendrels or Jane Lane, rewarding them with pensions and honors, showing gratitude that wins hearts. Let's break it down. Charles's big mistake to avoid repeating his dad's stubbornness. He learned from his fugitive days, don't push people too far and keep your allies close. Compare this to a modern comeback, like a business leader rebuilding after bankruptcy by listening to their team. The lesson for us, hardship can make you sharper, wiser, and ready to seize your moment. Think about a time you came back stronger after a failure. Charles's story is proof you can turn rock bottom into a throne. What's the big picture? Charles II's triumph isn't just about getting his crown back. It's about resilience, learning from mistakes, and the power of ordinary people who stood by him. For Americans, it's a story of second chances, like coming back from a career flop or a personal low. If you're digging this, smash that like button, drop a comment about your own comeback story, and hit subscribe for more epic history.